In this section of the DVD, we'll be looking at some of the study skills necessary to help you to successfully complete your programme of study. In the first instance, as you embark on the programme, it is important that you take proactive control of your time. You need to manage your time successfully because studying will make demands of that time. It's important to schedule your study times to create that obligation to routinise your study. It's also important to remember that each of the modules that you will study has been written by a different academic, different areas of expertise and with a different style of writing. Before you try and engage with the entire module, it's useful to flick through to get a feel for the style of writing, to get a feel for the way in which the modules have been written. It's also useful at the very beginning to start to set achievable targets, and again that's quite difficult until you are familiar with the nature of study. It's about knowing what you can realistically study within a given time period. Learning is evolutionary and we learn to learn. The more you engage with the literature, the better able you will be to set those achievable targets. It's also important to structure the sessions, to have a focus, to know what it is you are going to study. We then move on to look at the nature of the study sessions themselves. Study sessions should be broken down into manageable timeframes. This allows you to use your concentration to best effect. If you are studying something that is complicated or something that is totally new, then the level of concentration needed will be greater. If that's the case, then schedule about 30 minutes in terms of the time frame, and from there have a break. But within that break, try not to do anything that is intellectually challenging. Once people start to study, it takes them 4-5 minutes to get into the mindset that is conducive to absorbing new learning. If you lose that mindset, then it will take you another 5 minutes later on to regain that. So schedule your study periods 45 minutes, even an hour if it's material with which you are familiar or a subject area with which you are familiar. But break those study sessions into manageable size pieces. It's also important at the very early stages of your study to create a location index. As you go through the modules, as you go through the textbooks, as you go through the materials, you will come across theories and concepts and frameworks that you are going to need to refer to later. You may need them in your assignment, you may need to revise them for your examinations, you may wish to use them as part of your dissertation. At the very beginning, keep a location index, a reference source, so that you know where you can find particular models, particular frameworks, particular concepts. It allows you to refer back to them later on in your course of study. The other thing that is very important is that at the end of your period of study, you harvest that learning. The way in which we suggest you do that is to spend 2 minutes at the end of any period of study and to create for yourself a list of bullet points. There are two distinct benefits from this. By devising a list of the key issues that you have learned, you are reiterating that learning. It's also useful then, when you next sit down to study, to review the list that you produced at the end of the previous period of study. It builds the context and it familiarises you again with the nature of the materials that you are looking at. One of the questions that we are often asked at the beginning of any programme of study is when people ought to start writing, when they should start to focus on their assignment. In real terms, you should start to focus on the assignment as soon as is possible. Read the question ahead of reading through the module, through the materials, through the textbook. It allows you to contextualise what you're looking for. It allows you to get a feel for whereabouts you can find the relevant theories and concepts. It's also useful to make sure at the very early stage that you know what you are looking for. Highlight the key words. What are you expected to do? It's about creating a focus because you need to address the critical issues in the questions set. Within the assignment itself, it's important that a lot of emphasis is placed on discussion. Descriptive text is useful as background, but the important issue in studying at this level is that you can do something with the information. It's about understanding the theory in the first instance, but then being able to build discussions that challenge that theory. And if you're going to challenge theory, then it's also useful to challenge yourself. Why do you hold the views that you hold? Why do you have the opinions that you have? The programme that you are studying is not about creating people who think and act the same. It's about creating a mode of thinking. It's about allowing people to develop their thinking skills. A key issue for the university in terms of assignment writing is that of academic integrity. And it's because of this that I want to review at this stage the process of referencing. Referencing is crucial. The university are very, very keen that the work submitted be your own work or referenced if it is taken from external sources. All text that is taken from external sources must be referenced. There is an issue with the idea of plagiarism, and plagiarism is a term that is used when words of other people are presented as though they were your own. Text that is taken verbatim from any source must be in quotation marks with a full reference. Text that is paraphrased, text that you have translated into your own words still needs to be referenced. And I will elaborate on this in a few moments with some examples. Critically, all assignments must contain a bibliography. You must reference all sources. As an illustration of what the university means by plagiarism, I've taken a piece of text from a book by Kilduff and Sy, and I'm going to use this as an example of what is and what is not acceptable in terms of appropriate referencing. We have a look in the first instance at the wrong approach. What we can see here are two examples. The first example is where the text has been taken verbatim, word for word, from the original source, and there is no reference at all. In that context, the marker can safely assume that that work has been presented as though it were the original work of the student presenting it, and not the work of Kilduff and Sy. What we see underneath, again, is the text taken verbatim. There is a reference within this, but that reference would assume that that had been paraphrased, and it hasn't. That is a literal extract. That should be in quotation marks. To give you an example of correct referencing, here we have the same example as previously. The quote that has been taken directly from Kilduff and Sy is included in quotation marks and includes a full reference. That reference will then be expanded in the bibliography at the back of the assignment. Underneath, we see an example in which the text from Kilduff and Sy has been paraphrased. Here the student has put that particular quotation into their own words, but they are acknowledging that actually the thoughts that underpin that statement are those of Kilduff and Sy. Please make sure that you reference appropriately. Please make sure that all submitted work contains a bibliography. To conclude then, if we have a look at some of the key issues in terms of study skills, in the first instance, this idea of proactively managing your study, scheduling your study. It's about actively processing information. Don't simply read your texts. Paraphrase them, write them out, use your own ideas, develop your own thinking alongside the themes that you're studying. Harvest your learning. Make sure you have that point of reiteration that you can then use later to start the next study period. For your written work, it is crucial that you focus on the specifics of the question set. And within that, the presentation is important also. Proofread your work. Spell check and grammar check. This is not a language test, but these are professional qualifications, and therefore the way in which your work is presented is important. It's important that you attach a completed AGC form. That is where you will receive feedback from the marker. And lastly, and possibly most importantly, make sure that you enjoy your learning. Engage with the literature, engage with your own thinking to make this a thoroughly enjoyable programme of study.